The plasma cannon's final shot echoed across the dead battlefield like a funeral bell. Admiral Zexkara watched through the bridge's reinforced viewport as the last human ship, a battered destroyer called Defiance, broke apart in brilliant, orange flames. Debris scattered across the void like dying stars. "Signal all ships," Zexkara commanded, his forearms moving with practiced precision across the command console. "Cease fire. The battle is won." Around him, the bridge crew of the flagship Divine Retribution erupted in celebration. Chittering voices mixed with electronic victory songs from the AI units. The Galactic Coalition had fought humanity for 3 brutal years. Today, finally, the war was over. Or so they thought. Captain Sarah Chen floated in the wreckage of her command chair, her breath forming small clouds in the rapidly cooling air. The Defiance was dying around her, hull breaches venting atmosphere into space. Emergency lights flickered like dying fireflies. "Status report," she whispered into her comm unit, tasting blood. "Main engine dead, sir," came Lieutenant Torres's shaky voice. "Life support failing. We've got maybe 10 minutes of air left." Sarah closed her eyes. 10 minutes. That was all the time humanity had left in this war. The Coalition fleet stretched endlessly before them, over 2,000 ships representing 47 alien species. Earth's entire remaining fleet numbered exactly 1. Her ship, and it was falling apart. But as Sarah prepared to give the order to abandon ship, something impossible happened. Space tore, not like an explosion or a weapons discharge. Space itself ripped open like fabric, revealing something that shouldn't exist. A darkness so complete it seemed to devour light itself. And from that darkness, something emerged. One ship, then another, then hundreds. They were unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Black as the void between stars, shaped like predatory insects, they moved with a fluid grace that made her skin crawl. No running lights, no communications, just silent, deadly purpose. On the Coalition flagship, alarms began. Screaming. "Admiral." His sensor operator's voice cracked with panic. "New contacts. Massive energy signatures appearing on all vectors." Zexkara's celebration died in his throat. "Impossible. We destroyed their entire fleet. What are those ships?" "Unknown." "Configuration, sir, they're not in our databases, any of our databases." The black ships spread across space like a plague, positioning themselves between the Coalition fleet and Earth. There were so many of them now that they blocked out entire starfields. Then, for the first time in the war, humanity spoke with one voice. The transmission came from every black ship simultaneously, creating a harmony that resonated through space itself. But it wasn't a human voice that spoke. It was something older, something that had been waiting. "Attention, children of distant suns," the voice said, each word precise and terrifying in its calm. "You have trespassed upon the territory of humanity. You have murdered their young. You have silenced their songs. This cannot stand." "Admiral," Zexkara felt his blood freeze. Who are you?" "We are what humanity becomes when they stop trying to be civilized. We are the shock troops that arrive when the battle is already lost. We are the consequence of underestimating a species that you should have left alone." A pause. Then, impossibly, a sound that chilled every alien soul in the Coalition fleet. Laughter. "You wanted to see humanity at war, children of distant suns. You have not seen humanity at war. You have seen humanity playing at war, holding back, showing mercy, trying to be better than their nature." The black ships began to move, and their movement was wrong. They didn't obey physics as everyone understood. They flowed like liquid shadow, accelerating beyond what their mass should allow. Now you will see what we truly are, what we have always been, beneath the smiles and handshakes and diplomatic treaties. You will see why the wise species of this galaxy learned to fear the third planet from the yellow star, and you will understand why they warned you never to make us angry. Sarah Chen watched from her dying ship as the black vessels surrounded the Coalition fleet like wolves circling wounded prey. Her comm system crackled to life, displaying a message she'd never seen before. Terran Defense Protocol Omega, Authorization, All-Father. Unknown Terran ship, came a voice from the nearest black vessel. This is Commander Ghost 7 of the Deep Fleet. We'll have medical teams aboard in 30 seconds. Stand by for extraction. Deep Fleet? Sarah whispered. I've never heard of any Deep Fleet. Of course not, Captain. We don't exist until we're needed. Today we're needed. As rescue teams materialized aboard her ship through technology she couldn't understand, Sarah watched the Coalition fleet. 2,000 ships, the largest armada ever assembled. They hung in space, weapons powered but trembling, facing fewer than 500 black ships that seemed to eat light itself. The numbers should have favored the Coalition overwhelmingly. They were about to learn why numbers didn't matter. Chapter 2. The Deep Dark Between Dr. Yuki Tanaka materialized aboard the black ship in a wash of blue energy that left her stomach somewhere behind in space. The teleportation technology was beyond anything Earth's scientists had developed, or so she'd thought. "Welcome aboard the Nightfall, Doctor," said Commander Ghost 7, removing his helmet to reveal a face that was human but wrong somehow. Too pale, eyes too dark, smile too knowing. "We apologize for the dramatic extraction, but your research is needed." Yuki steadied herself against a bulkhead that felt warm under her touch. "My research? I'm a xenobiologist. What could you possibly need me for during a battle?" "Not during, Doctor. After. Come, let us show you what humanity has become in the deep dark between the stars." The interior of the ship defied physics as Yuki understood it. Corridors stretched longer than the ship's external dimensions should allow. Gravity worked in directions that made her head spin. Crew members moved with fluid grace, their movements too quick, too precise to be entirely human. "How long have you been out here?" she asked as they walked. "Time moves differently in the deep," Ghost 7 replied. "We launched the first Deep Fleet 70 years ago. For us, it's been 700 years. We've had time to evolve." They entered what seemed to be a bridge, but the walls were covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Tactical displays showed the Coalition fleet in perfect detail, down to individual crew members aboard their ships. Evolved how? Ghost 7 gestured to a wall that suddenly became transparent, showing the battle space beyond. "Watch and learn, Doctor. Watch and see what humanity becomes when we stop pretending to be civilized." The first Coalition ship to fire lasted exactly 3.7 seconds. Yuki watched in horrified fascination as the alien vessel's weapons discharge was absorbed by the black ship's hull, like light being swallowed by a black hole. Then the black ship changed. Its surface rippled like living metal, and something that wasn't quite weapon fire but was definitely death reached out and touched the Coalition vessel. The alien ship didn't explode. It simply ceased. One moment, it was there, solid and real and full of living beings. The next moment, it was gone as if it had never existed at all. "What did you do to them?" Yuki whispered. "We showed them the dark between atoms," Ghost 7 said simply. "We taught them what it means to be truly alone in the universe. We gave them the gift of understanding that they are less than dust, less than memory, less than the brief sparks of thought in minds that have already forgotten them." The Coalition fleet opened fire as one, 2,000 ships unleashing enough firepower to crack a moon. Energy beams, plasma cannons, kinetic projectiles, and weapons Yuki couldn't identify filled space with deadly light. None of it mattered. The black ships moved through the weapons fire like it was gentle rain. Some attacks passed through them entirely as if they weren't there. Others were absorbed and redirected back at their sources with interest added. "How?" Yuki breathed. "We learned to stop being entirely here," Ghost 7 explained. "When you travel in the deep dark for centuries, you learn that reality is negotiable, that physics are suggestions, that the difference between what is and what should be is mostly a matter of perspective. Coalition ships began vanishing, not exploding, just ceasing to exist. One moment they were fully functional warships with thousands of crew members. The next, empty space. Where do they go? Nowhere. Everywhere. They become part of the deep, dark between thoughts. They join the space between heartbeats. They learn what it means to have never been born. Admiral Zexkara's voice crackled across all frequencies, desperation clear even through the translation software. What do you want? Why are you doing this? The response came from every black ship simultaneously, voices harmonizing in ways that made reality shiver. You came to our home. You killed our children. You silenced our music and burned our dreams. Did you think there would be no consequence? Did you believe that a species that conquered its own star system through nuclear fire would simply roll over and die quietly? We didn't know, Zexkara pleaded. We were told humans were a warrior species, but you thought you understood what that meant. You saw our armies and our fleets and thought you knew the extent of human violence. But children, playing with toy soldiers, don't understand war. Farmers using hunting rifles don't understand warfare. You met our diplomats and merchants and peace builders and thought you had met humanity. The laughter returned, echoing from every black ship. You never met our monsters. Another 100 coalition ships simply weren't anymore. We are the things that human parents warn their children about in bedtime stories. We are the darkness at the edge of human campfires. We are what humans become when they stop pretending that civilization matters more than survival. Yuki grabbed Ghost 7's arm. You have to stop this. They're surrendering. Look at them. They're trying to retreat. Ghost 7 looked at her with those two dark eyes, and for a moment she saw something in them that made her soul recoil. Doctor, you still don't understand. This isn't a battle. Battles can be won or lost. This is an education. We are teaching the galaxy what happens when you make humanity truly angry. But the killing will continue until every species in this galaxy understands that humanity is not to be trifled with. Until they know in their bones that the third planet from the yellow star is forbidden territory. Until they teach their children's children's children that Earth is where the monsters live, and monsters should be left alone. The coalition fleet, what remained of it, began broadcasting surrender signals on every frequency. The black ships ignored them completely. Chapter 3. What monsters dream Captain Elena Vasquez had been dead for 70 years. She remembered dying, the cancer eating through her body as Earth's first deep space exploration vessel prepared for launch. She remembered the choice: die slowly in a hospital bed or volunteer for the Deep Fleet program and let them try something experimental. She'd chosen the dark. Now she stood on the bridge of the Whisper in the Void, watching coalition ships disappear from existence, and wondered if she'd chosen correctly. Her body was different now, stronger, faster, capable of surviving in hard vacuum for hours. But the price... Captain, her navigation officer reported, the divine retribution is trying to flee. Admiral Zexkara is aboard. Elena smiled, and the expression was predatory. Is he now? Ghost 7 wants that one alive. He has questions to answer. Shall I deploy the erasure field? No. This one we take the old-fashioned way. Launch hunters. What emerged from the Whisper in the Void weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were living shadows given form and purpose, each one containing the consciousness of a human volunteer who had chosen to become something beyond death. They moved through space like sharks through water, and they were hungry. The hunters reached the divine retribution in seconds and began feeding, not on the ship itself but on the space around it, creating a bubble of absolute nothingness that trapped the massive vessel like a fly in amber. Elena materialized on the coalition. Flagships bridged through methods that violated several fundamental laws of physics. The alien crew, massive four-armed beings with chitinous armor, backed away from her in terror. Admiral Zexkara, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made reality ripple. We need to talk. The Admiral was clearly a warrior born. His scarred carapace spoke of 100 battles, but his hands trembled as he faced her. What are you? I'm what humanity becomes when we stop dying, Elena replied. When we stop accepting limitations like mortality and physics and the speed of light. When we decide that the universe's rules don't apply to us anymore. This is impossible. Our intelligence reports said humans were barely spacefaring, primitive, limited to sublight travel. Elena laughed, and the sound made the bridge lights flicker. Oh, Admiral, your intelligence was so very, very wrong. Let me tell you a story about humanity that your spy networks never learned. She gestured, and the bridge's main display activated, showing images that shouldn't exist. 73 years ago, a human scientist named Dr. Sarah Kim made a discovery that changed everything. She found that consciousness, true consciousness, isn't limited by the physical brain. It's a pattern that can be transferred, enhanced, made eternal. The display showed vast shipyards hidden in the deep space between stars, where vessels of impossible design took shape. We built our first deep fleet ships in secret, crewed them with volunteers who were dying anyway, people who had nothing left to lose. We sent them out into the dark between galaxies to explore, to learn, to grow beyond the limitations of flesh and time. While your species played politics and built trade routes, our deep fleets were discovering technologies that would drive your scientists mad. We learned to fold space, to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, to treat causality as a guideline rather than a law. Admiral Zexkara's voice was barely a whisper. Why didn't you use these weapons from the beginning? Why fight us with conventional fleets? Elena's smile was terrifying in its gentleness. Because we hoped you could be reasoned with. Because humanity still remembers what it's like to be young and foolish and eager for war. We sent our regular fleets, our children playing with toys, hoping you would see sense and withdraw. But you didn't. You killed millions of humans. You bombed our colonies. You tried to break our spirit with overwhelming force. Her voice dropped to barely audible levels. You made us angry. The display now showed hundreds of black ships emerging from deep space, not just around Earth, but around every coalition, world simultaneously. What you're seeing here isn't a battle, Admiral. It's a demonstration. Your fleet isn't the target, it's the example. Right now, deep fleet vessels are positioned over every coalition homeworld, every major colony, every space station and habitat in your territory. Zexkara's forearms went limp. You're going to destroy us all. No, Admiral, that would be wasteful. We're going to give you a choice. The same choice we give every species that makes the mistake of threatening humanity. Elena's form flickered, becoming something between human and shadow. You can surrender unconditionally, agree to pay reparations for every human life lost, and withdraw to the far edge of the galaxy where you will remain for the next 1,000 years. Or we show you what humans are truly capable of when we stop caring about collateral damage, when we stop pretending that mercy is strength, when we decide that your species doesn't deserve to exist anymore. The display shifted, showing coalition worlds from orbital perspective. But something was wrong with the images. They flickered between normal planetary surfaces and empty space. Those worlds still exist, Admiral, but they also don't exist. We've placed them in quantum superposition, simultaneously there and not there. If you refuse our terms, we collapse the wave function in favor of not there. 47 species, 300 billion sentient beings will simply never have been. That's genocide on a scale beyond comprehension. Elena's voice was gentle as starlight and cold as the void between galaxies. No, Admiral. That's Tuesday. You wanted to see what humanity looks like at war. This is what we look like when we're being merciful. The coalition admiral collapsed into his command chair, the weight of impossible choices crushing down on him. What guarantee do we have that you'll honor your terms? The same guarantee you gave our children when you bombed our schools, Elena replied. Trust or extinction. Choose quickly, Admiral. My patience is not infinite, and my colleagues in the Deep Fleet are much less diplomatic than I am. On the tactical display, more coalition ships simply vanished from existence. Not destroyed, erased, as if they had never been built, never been crewed, never been dreamed of by their creators. I surrender, Zexkara whispered. Unconditional surrender. On behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I surrender. Elena nodded. Wise choice. You'll find the terms of your exile transmitted to your systems momentarily. Oh, and Admiral, one more thing. Yes? Tell your children about this day. Tell them about the species from the third planet of the Yellow Star. Teach them that some wars can't be won, only survived. And make sure they understand that humanity's mercy is not weakness, it's a gift they should never ever take for granted. Elena began to fade, becoming shadow once more. Because next time we won't send the nice ones. Asa Chapter 4. The long road home. The Defiance was whole again. Captain Sarah Chen stood on her reconstructed bridge, watching through viewports that had been shattered minutes ago, but now showed no sign of damage. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. The ship was cleaner than it had ever been, systems running at efficiency levels that exceeded original specifications. Captain, Lieutenant Torres called from his station, voice tight with controlled fear. I'm reading our crew manifest as complete, but I remember Johnson and Martinez dying in the reactor breach. I remember holding Johnson's dog tags. Sarah felt the same cold dread settling in her stomach. She remembered her crew dying, remembered watching good people turn to vapor and vacuum. But here they were, Johnson at his engineering station, Martinez monitoring communications, all of them, whole and healthy and looking at her with questions in their eyes. This is Ghost 7, came the voice from the comm system. All human vessels have been restored. Think of it as a thank you gift from the Deep Fleet. Your people died bravely, Captain Chen. They deserved better than death in the service of a war that should never have been fought. Sarah's hand trembled as she activated her comm unit. How? How did you bring them back? Death is negotiable when you understand the deeper mathematics of existence. Your crew didn't die. They were temporarily displaced from the active timeline. We simply undisplaced them. Through the viewport, Sarah watched the Coalition fleet, what remained of it, forming into convoy formation for the journey to their exile. Over 2,000 ships had entered this system. Less than 400 remained, and their crews moved with the broken gestures of beings who had seen their understanding of reality crumble. Commander Ghost 7, Sarah said carefully. What happens now? Do you return to wherever you came from? Silence for a long moment. When Ghost 7's voice returned, it carried a weariness that spoke of centuries. We go back to the deep dark between stars, Captain. Back to our patrol routes at the edge of known space. Back to watching and waiting and making sure that humanity's children can sleep safely in their beds. Will Earth see you again? When you need us, we'll be there. When monsters threaten your worlds, we'll come. When the universe forgets why it should fear the species from the third planet, we'll remind it. A pause. But we hope that day never comes, Captain. We hope your children grow up in a galaxy peaceful enough that they never have to meet us. Dr. Yuki Tanaka materialized on the bridge in another wash of blue energy. She looked changed. Her eyes held depths that hadn't been there before, and when she moved, it was with a fluid grace that seemed slightly wrong. Doctor? Sarah asked. Are you all right? I've seen things, Captain, Yuki said quietly. I've seen what we can become, what we will become if the universe keeps pushing us. She shuddered. The Deep Fleet isn't human anymore, not entirely. There's something new. Something that humanity becomes when we stop accepting limitations. Are they still us? They remember being us. They remember being human, but they've been in the dark so long that they've become part of it. There are shadows, Captain, the parts of humanity we don't like to think about. Our capacity for absolute ruthlessness, for cold calculation, for decisions that save millions by sacrificing billions. Sarah watched the black ships beginning to fade from view, not moving, away but simply becoming less real, less present until they existed more as memory than matter. They saved us, she said. Yes. But the cost? Yuki shook her head. The coalition species will never recover from this. They'll spend the next 1,000 years in exile, but more than that, they'll spend forever knowing that humanity has weapons that can edit them out of existence itself. Children who were never born, worlds that never formed, entire civilizations that become retroactively fictional. The war is over. This war is over. But someday, Captain, someday another species will look at humanity and think we're weak, think we're vulnerable, think they can take what's ours. Yuki's voice dropped to a whisper. And when that day comes, the Deep Fleet will be waiting in the dark between stars, ready to teach the universe once again why the wise species leave Earth alone. Sarah looked around at her restored crew, her restored ship, her restored hope for the future. Everything was perfect now. Everything was exactly as it should be. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. That humanity had crossed a line from which there was no return. They had shown the galaxy their monsters, and monsters once revealed could never be completely hidden again. Set course for Earth, she ordered. It's time to go home. As the Defiance turned toward the yellow star that had given birth to humanity, the last of the black ships faded from view. But they didn't disappear entirely. They simply moved sideways into dimensions where time flowed differently, where space bent to accommodate thoughts too large for reality to contain. In the deep dark between galaxies, the Deep Fleet settled into their eternal watch. Hundreds of ships crewed by beings who had once been human, who remembered being human, who had chosen to become something beyond human to protect humanity itself. They would wait there in the cold and dark, growing stranger and more terrible with each passing century, until the day they were needed again. And in the civilized galaxy, on 1,000 worlds belonging to 100 species, parents would begin telling their children new bedtime stories, stories about the monsters that lived on the third planet from the yellow star, stories about what happened to species foolish enough to make humanity angry, stories that would ensure that this day, this terrible, necessary day, would never need to be repeated. The battle was over. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never be the same. Epilogue. 10 years after. The memorial garden on Luna was quiet in the way that only space could provide, not merely an absence of sound, but a profound stillness that seemed to swallow noise before it could be born. Captain Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen, walked the pathways between monuments that honored the dead from humanity's last war. She paused before a black stone obelisk that listed the names of everyone who had died aboard coalition vessels during those final moments. 47 species. Millions of names etched in languages humanity was still learning to pronounce. At the bottom, in simple English, were the words, "They came in anger, they died in fear. We remember them not as enemies, but as children who learned too late that some battles should never be fought. You come here often," observed a familiar voice. Sarah turned to find Dr. Yuki Tanaka approaching through the memorial garden. 10 years had been kind to the xenobiologist. Her hair was silver now, and lines around her eyes spoke of laughter as well as worry. But those eyes still held depths that hadn't been there before her time aboard the Deep Fleet ships. Every year, Sarah admitted, on the anniversary, I keep thinking about all those people who just stopped existing. Did they have families, dreams, children who were never born because their parents were edited out of history? Ghost 7 told me something, once, Yuki said, settling beside Sarah on a bench that faced Earth's blue and white sphere. He said the Deep Fleet doesn't just carry weapons. They carry the weight of every choice humanity might have to make, every terrible decision that might someday be necessary. Do you think they're still out there? I know they are. Sometimes, I dream about them, riding the dark between galaxies, growing stranger and more powerful with each passing year. They're becoming something that isn't quite human anymore, but they're doing it so humanity itself doesn't have to. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching Earth turn slowly in the void. The kids born after the war, they grow up different. More confident, like they know something the rest of us don't. They know they're protected, Yuki said simply. They know that somewhere in the deep dark their guardian monsters are watching over them. It's changed us as a species, knowing that we have that kind of power in reserve. Has it changed us for the better? Look around, Sarah. Look at what we've built in 10 years. Sarah looked. The memorial garden was just one small part of Luna's transformation. The moon had become humanity's workshop and laboratory, its cities growing in graceful spirals that reached toward the stars. But more than that, trade routes now flowed freely between Earth and 100 peaceful species. The galaxy had become a place of commerce and cooperation, not because everyone loved each other, but because everyone understood the alternative. The Galactic Coalition's exile ends in a few decades, Sarah said. When they return, they'll find a very different galaxy. They'll find a galaxy that learned to be peaceful, not out of love or wisdom, but out of pure practical terror. Yuki smiled grimly. Sometimes I wonder if that's enough. If peace born from fear can last. It's lasted 10 years so far, and it might last 10,000 more. But someday, Sarah, someday someone will forget. Some young species will look at humanity and think we've grown soft, think our monsters were just stories told by frightened old aliens. And then the deep fleet will emerge from the dark between stars, stranger and more terrible than ever, and they'll remind the galaxy why Earth is forbidden territory. Yuki stood, brushing lunar dust from her clothes. Come on, the council meeting starts in an hour and they're voting on the Jupiter colony expansion. As they walked back toward the transport station, Sarah thought about the children playing in Earth's cities, growing up under skies protected by shadows they would never see. She thought about the deep fleet, riding the edges of reality in their impossible ships, becoming something beyond human so that humanity itself could remain human. She thought about the price of peace and wondered if it was worth paying. Behind them, etched in stone and memory, the names of the coalition dead caught the light from Earth's star. Somewhere in the deep dark between galaxies, beings who had once been human continued their eternal patrol, carrying weapons that could edit entire species out of existence. The battle was over. Humanity had won. And in the quiet spaces between, heartbeats in the dark between thoughts, the monsters that protected humanity's children kept their vigil. Waiting, watching, ready. The end.